Okay. All right, so I'm going to run through this fairly quickly, and I apologize to Margot for actually putting PowerPoint up. Okay, so I just want to first of all get everybody on the same page about what AI is. And this is the anti-mystical version of AI. Right? This is not about consciousness or intentionality or autonomy or any of those things. This is just making computers do the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing, because doing the right thing is more useful. So if you want a simple metaphor, then just take it from chess and then expand that out to the whole world. So that's the human, that's the robot. And so what happens with a chess robot is the human specifies the goal, and the robot carries it out, okay, using algorithms that, for example, take as input a chess position and then look ahead into future possible positions and sequences of moves, and then chooses a move. And at the state of the art right now, humans are toast, okay? You know, no matter how good you are at playing chess, these programs will just wipe the floor with you, even running on a laptop. Okay, so I want you to just imagine that and just extend that idea to the whole world. Right? So the world is just a bigger chessboard. It has some additional properties. It's not fully observable. The robot may not initially know all the rules of the world, so it's unpredictable and so on. But essentially just think of it as the world as a larger chessboard on which potentially, at some time in the future, machines will be making better moves than you. They'll be taking into account more information and looking further ahead into the future. And so if you are playing a game against a machine in the world, if we are, the human race is playing again against the machine in the world, then the assumption is that at some point we will lose. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. So why are we doing AI? Because it's cool. This is self-evident to many people throughout the course of history, not just since computers were invented, but even before. Wouldn't it be cool to create something that had the intellectual capabilities that we typically associate with humans? And it's self-evident that the more intelligent, the better. How could that be false? Some people say that, oh well, that's fine. There's no reason to even have this discussion because we'll never make systems that are intelligent. But I have absolutely no technical basis for that kind of pessimism, and I'll come back to it later. But these days, we don't think that there's any technical reason for a barrier to arise, and we will eventually achieve whatever physics allows us to achieve. And the good thing about intelligence is that it's responsible for what we have. What makes human life worth living, our civilization. And if we could obtain more of it, then we could have a much better civilization. And progress seems to be accelerating. So journalists often ask me, why is there such a to-do about AI these days? And I think one reason is that progress is accelerating. From the inside, it seems fairly steady. But what's happening is that one by one technologies sort of cross that threshold from where they are prototypes in the lab, where we, among our technical community, we can appreciate the progress. But they cross that threshold to being useful in the real world. And then from the outside, it looks like a big explosion has happened. And that's happened with speech recognition. It's going to happen with self-driving cars, and so on. One reason is that there's now a pretty good and solid theoretical foundation for the field, which wasn't there 30 years ago, and certainly wasn't there at the beginning of the field. There is a huge increase in computational resources, but that really facilitates the speed of the experimental cycle. So an experiment that used to take you 2 months to run on a computer would now take 2 minutes, and so that means you can do research at a much faster rate. It's also true that industry is spending a lot of money. So I would say in the last 5 years, industry has spent more money on AI than governments have ever spent in the history of the field. So that's another reason why things are moving along quite quickly. So I'll just show you a few examples. This comes from DeepMind, which was recently purchased by Google, a small company in England. And basically it's a learning system that wakes up and it sees the screen of an Atari video game. And it's just told what score it has. That's the only information that it has. It has no idea that there is such a thing as time, or space, or aliens, or bullets, or movement, or anything, right? It's simply exposed to the screen. It wakes up as a newborn baby and sees the screen and tries to make this number higher. Okay? It does this for about 40 different video games on all kinds of driving games, shooting games, ping pong games, you name it. A very wide variety of games. It does that in the space of a few hours. So if your human baby woke up and by the same afternoon was beating adults at a wide range of video games, you'd be absolutely terrified. So this particular event actually was one of the reasons why a lot of journalists got kind of overexcited about the potential for AI. Another one was the defeat of the human world champions in Jeopardy, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a quiz game that requires quite a lot of intellect to do well at. And some of you have seen the Google car. This is actually video footage from the Google car. Let me show the video to run. So this is the raw input that the Google car camera system receives. So just to show you it's not terribly high quality. And yet the Google car has driven hundreds of thousands of miles, at least we believe, without any serious accidents. And is doing pretty well. So it handles a wide variety of circumstances and image qualities. Yeah.
Is that the input to Google Street View?
No. To Google Street View, no. This is the Google car's. It has an onboard camera which it uses.
Well, so does the
Sorry?
Street View.
Autonomous car.
It's a self-driving car that uses this video to decide how to control the car.
And it does drive.
It drives by itself. This is a robot in my colleague Peter Abiel's lab. And you know, it's typically been said by the Chatterati that you know, AI is a paradox, that things that we think of as requiring intellect, like playing chess and solving math problems, turn out to be easy, and yet machines still don't have the dexterity of a small child. And that's, you know, people, economists, famous economists saying that, you know, manual dexterity tasks like folding towels, you know, are going to be safe for a long time. People don't need to worry about losing those jobs. And I showed this to one of those economists, and he said, "Shit, that's another 500 million jobs gone." So this kind of thing is likely to catch on. We're going to see robots doing all kinds of domestic tasks, and the difficulty is fitting in the robot into the home environment, which is extremely unstructured. The road environment is relatively structured, and even so, the Google car guys say that there are still lots and lots of circumstances that come up where the car's not quite sure what to do because it's unusual. But the home environment is even more unstructured. So we have to, there's still going to be a learning process of industry figuring out, okay, these are the capabilities we have, how do we make them fit into the home environment? And sometimes the home environment will actually change to accommodate the robot, and that's nothing new. So another interesting example is the ability of systems to actually do automatic captioning. So not just recognizing objects, but actually being able to describe whole scene. So here's a typical example, right? A group of young people playing frisbee. So this is a caption generated entirely automatically, and this is still not perfect. I would say it's a long way from perfect. But given that the frisbee only exists as a white line in this image, it's actually quite impressive that it's able to figure that out at all. And these kinds of events cause people, from my generation, who've been around for a long time and seeing the difficulty of these problems, struggling daily with trying to make things even rudimentary work well. You could call these holy cow moments, where an experienced technologist sees something that they just weren't expecting to be feasible at this stage. So for me, it was the Big Dog robot. I didn't bring a Big Dog video, but if you've seen Big Dog, you can type Big Dog into YouTube and it'll show you the video. It's a four-legged robot that by itself clambers up steep snow-clad hillsides, recovers its balance on an icy pond when someone tries to push it over in really animal-like ways. You just see that video, and if you've worked on leg locomotion for decades, as some people have, to see that video is a holy cow moment. You think, this is not just incremental progress, this problem is essentially solved. And so those kinds of moments are happening more and more often. This is a little piece of work that I did. This is a small nuclear test aftermath in Nevada. This is a small test. The largest nuclear test ever done was 500 times as big as this one. And the United Nations has an organization, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization, which is trying to put a stop to testing nuclear weapons. They have a big monitoring system, and so what they want to do is to find out whether anyone is exploding nuclear weapons underground, usually, anywhere in the world, and that's what this network of sensors is for. The US refused to ratify the treaty because they said the verification problem was too difficult. So I've been working on improving the verification capabilities. So the interesting thing is that AI technology, completely separate from this problem, had reached the point where within the space of 3 hours you could prototype a system that was better than what the United Nations had built using 100 years of seismological research and over $1 billion of funding. So the technology has really moved on to the point where it's quite powerful and can do some quite impressive things. So this just shows, this is the test from North Korea. This is where it actually took place. This is the estimate of the location that our system produced, which is about 700 meters. Even though the sensors are in fact on the other side of the Earth, we can pinpoint the location to within 700 meters. This was the best that the UN could do with the entire assembled collection of human expert geophysicists as well as their automated system. Okay, so given that there's progress, it seems reasonable, and I have a section in my textbook since the first edition, 1994, asking this question. Maybe we should think about what happens if we succeed. And that is something that people haven't thought about very much. And this is really what I'm asking people to do. Think about what happens if we actually succeed in what we and many of the major governments in the world and the largest corporations in the world and tens of thousands of engineers and scientists, what we are trying to do. It seems odd for all those people to be trying to do something and not have thought about what happens if they succeed. And this is what I'm asking. So I.J. Good, who was a statistician who worked with Turing during the war, I think he may even have appeared in the movie The Imitation Game, I'm not sure. But he worked with Turing on code breaking in the war, and in 1965 he wrote a little paper about ultra-intelligent machines. And he said that it clearly would be a huge event if we did succeed. And if we did succeed, it would be followed by this intelligence explosion. The machines would be able to redesign themselves to improve their capabilities faster than we can even keep track of it. And before long, we would be left far behind. My belief is that if we succeeded, that would be the biggest event in human history. So I do think it's important to think about it. because we don't want it to be the last event in human history. Okay. And this was something that I wrote, and then it went into an editorial on Huffington Post along with Stephen Hawking and a couple of other people co-wrote the editorial. And then I was at a UN meeting in Geneva, and I heard the ambassador of the People's Republic of China actually, this was the opening line of his statement to the United Nations. So it sort of moved into the popular world as a meme. If it's important, and obviously I think it is, then you have to think about it. And I would say right now, this is what's going on. It's as if we got an email from outer space from some superior alien civilization. And the email said, you know, we're going to arrive in 30 to 50 years' time. That's a reasonable estimate. I don't want to subscribe to that estimate of how long before we have human-level AI, but it's a reasonable estimate. And we basically haven't thought about it. Right? So this is kind of what's happening right now with our understanding of this problem. And there are lots of silly things that people are saying. Some people talk about machine IQ, which doesn't exist, and they say that this IQ is increasing exponentially with Moore's law, which is complete rubbish, because just Moore's law only allows you to get the wrong answer faster, and so it doesn't actually improve IQ very much. Some people think that the risk of AI, what we're talking about here, right, this event, this importance of this, comes from armies of blood-crazed robots, and then they start showing pictures of Terminators and things like that. Some people think that the risk comes from spontaneous robot consciousness, that somehow AI is going to just go rogue and these things are going to become conscious and malevolent. And then they show pictures of Terminator robots. And in fact, almost any time a journalist mentions AI, they will show pictures of AI. I keep trying to tell them not to, but they can't help themselves. Okay, so what is the problem then, if it's not one of these things? Right? It's something much simpler and much more straightforward and common sense. Right? You build an AI system, so go back to the chess program. It's extremely good at winning, which means extremely good at achieving the goal that you gave it. Right? You told the chess program to win. Okay? So you gave it the goal. If you don't give it exactly the right goal, right, which means the goal that aligns perfectly with the goals of the human race, whatever the hell those are, then you set up a game. Right? It's no longer a perfectly cooperative game. It's a game where there is not perfect cooperation between the human race and the machine. And unfortunately, we don't know how to specify the goal properly. All the disciplines that deal with optimization, deal with maximally achieving objectives, which include all these ones, AI, economics, stat, operations, research, control theory, they all assume that the user just comes along and specifies the goal. So they don't study how to specify it properly. And Norbert Wiener, who invented control theory, invented automation in some ways, made this point back in 1960, and no one listened to him at all. So if you have the wrong values in a system, right, then you're in the same situation as King Midas. Right? He specified the objective. He got exactly what he said, but it wasn't what he actually wanted, because he misspecified his objectives. And we don't know how to specify them correctly. Everyone who has a genie always asks, third wish is please undo the first two wishes. Right? But it's too late by that time. Yeah. I want to introduce very briefly something called instrumental goals, because this is an important part of the argument. Right, that goes along hand in hand with this problem of value misalignment. So an instrumental goal is something that the machine adopts not because you told it to adopt it, but because it's a useful sub-goal of what you asked it to do. So no matter what the goal is, whether it's calculate pi or cure cancer, the machine can't calculate pi or cure cancer if someone switches it off. So in order to ensure that it carries out your instruction to calculate pi or to cure cancer, it needs to protect itself. Right? This is not because it wants to preserve its own existence. It doesn't care at all about its own existence. It cares only about the goal you gave it, which is to cure cancer. So in order to do that, it has to protect itself from people accidentally or deliberately turning it off. Okay, that's just one of the moves in the game of chess that it's extremely good at playing. The same thing with acquiring more resources. If it has more compute power, more money, and so on, it can do a better job of curing cancer. So automatically, unless you're extremely careful, you find yourself in conflict with the machine that you set up to cure cancer or calculate pi. And so you combine these sub-goals, which apply to pretty much anything, and a misaligned original primary goal, then you have a problem. This is the problem that's well illustrated in 2001. So I recently had a discussion with a journalist about all the AI movies and which ones are the most realistic. I think 2001 is probably the most realistic. It doesn't require consciousness, it doesn't talk about malevolence, it's just Hal has been given a mission, and it's very good, and they play chess at the beginning of the movie. And it just shows how much smarter Hal is than the human. It treats Dave like a little child. Dave, you're getting much better. So, okay, so my proposal is that we should stop just doing AI as it's currently conceived, which means building machines that are extremely good at optimizing whatever goal you give them, period. And instead, we need to figure out how to make sure that the results of doing that are beneficial, which means in particular how to make sure that our machines are given goals whose optimization results in behavior that we actually like, okay, that we're happy to see. It's not an easy thing to do. I could give an entire talk actually about this first bullet item, cooperative inverse reinforcement. So what does that mean? It means that the machine learns your values by watching your behavior. So generally what that means is learns the values of the human race by watching all the behavior of humans. Everything that's ever been written down really describes human behavior and how people react to human behavior. Who gets a medal, who gets put in jail, who gets paid, who doesn't get paid. That information contains within it implicitly a huge amount of data about human values. Even though human values are implicit, we don't usually say what they are. They are inconsistent. We don't follow them. We can't follow them because we're not perfectly rational. We don't have the computational resources to actually play or do the right thing according to our own values. So if you watch two people playing chess and one of them loses, does that mean that the guy who lost didn't want to win? And the other guy who won did want to win? No, they both wanted to win, but they were computationally incapable of playing the right moves to make sure that they did win. Okay, I would like to just run over a little bit here, if that's okay, and talk about some of the debate that's going on. Because these issues are quite controversial, and Piero has already written a whole book, actually, about why this argument is completely fallacious. So let me go through some of the arguments. One is, it'll never happen. We'll never reach human-level AI, so there's nothing to worry about. Okay? To me, this is like saying, well, yes, we are driving towards the cliff, but I'm pretty sure we're going to run out of gas before we hit the cliff. That seems like an odd way of managing the future of the human race. And just to give you a historical example, this is Ernest Rutherford, world's most famous nuclear physicist back in the 1930s. And on September 11th, 1933, and on many other occasions, he said, there is no possibility of ever getting energy out of atoms. On September 12th, 1933, Leo Szilard invented the nuclear chain reaction. In less than a year, he had patented the nuclear reactor and devised the first basic designs for a nuclear weapon. Okay, so never became less than 24 hours. And in fact, Szilard did this because he was pissed off by what Rutherford had said and read about it in the Times the next morning. In 1939, when he finally succeeded in demonstrating a nuclear chain reaction, this is what he wrote in his notebook. We switched everything off and went home. There was little doubt in my mind that the world was headed for grief. right? Because at that point it was too late. They were already in an arms race with Germany, and it was too late to stop. Okay, because there had been no forethought whatsoever at the government level about the possibility of this kind of technological breakthrough, and that was partly the responsibility of Rutherford. Another answer, which is maybe a little more reasonable, is that yes, there is an issue, but it's so far off in the future that we don't know what to do about it yet. Okay? And I can have some sympathy with that. And Andrew Ng, who's a very famous computer scientist at Stanford, also head of Baidu research, says, I don't worry about overpopulation on Mars either. Right? Which sounds like, yeah, fine, I don't worry about it. So he doesn't worry about it. So why should we worry about AI taking over the world? It's so far off. But there's a big difference between these two, so it's not a good analogy, because all the major governments and corporations in the world are working on it. Right? So if they were all working on moving the human race to Mars, and they hadn't thought about what we would eat and drink and breathe when we got there, you would say they were insane. Right? In other words, they haven't thought about what happens if they succeed in moving the human race to Mars. That's pathetic. Right? So it seems that somehow even very famous, brilliant scientists, Andrew is a brilliant person, are somehow driven to make fatuous arguments to try and defend the status quo. You could also say, you know, if an asteroid was to hit the Earth in 75 years' time, right? When should we start worrying about that? 5 years before? 10 years before? No, we should start worrying about it now, because we don't know how long it's going to take to develop something to defeat the problem. And you could say the same thing about global warming, just going backwards in history instead of looking forwards. When was the right time to start worrying about global warming? In the 19th century, before there was a huge industrial complex built around fossil fuels. You could have said, yes, internal combustion is great, coal-fired power generation is great, but there are going to be these other consequences, and you should think about alternative methods of solving those problems. Some people say you can't control research, it's just going to happen anyway, so shut up. But this is not true. In genetic engineering, since 1975, the biology community has refrained from any experiments that modify the human genome in a heritable way. And this is an amazing thing. It's essentially a voluntary ban that's worldwide, and it's been respected almost completely, except with little tiny bits around the edge, but it's held incredibly well. And this just goes to show that yes, we can. If you understand what the problem is, and you decide that this is not the direction that the human race wants to go, then you can prevent the wrong kind of research from happening. Another response is, well, anyone who says this is just a Luddite. But I don't think I'm a Luddite, because I spent my entire life doing AI research. And Norbert Wiener spent his entire life doing control theory and automation. This is not about stopping AI research. It should not continue unless we make progress on solving this problem. Okay? And so it's essential for me, I want to continue doing AI. I want people to keep buying my book. We have to solve the problem of value alignment and control of increasingly intelligent systems. And it doesn't mean that you're against AI, any more than someone who works on containing the fusion reaction is against physics. Right? It's just common sense that you should do that. So it's not something that's an ethical dilemma. It shouldn't be in ethics workshops. It's just a straightforward common sense consequence of the fact that AI is increasingly successful. So my summary is that we're moving towards this event that's very large, and the field, I think, is inevitably changing. There are some people kicking and screaming, but it's going to change.